Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Sword Art Online Alicization anime review. This one's going to be for episode 40, which is called Code 871. And this was another very good episode of SAO. Like a lot of the episodes recently, it has been a lot of plot points happening at the same time. So we get a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they don't focus on any one particular thing for any length of time. But it's because we're at the stage of the story where there is a lot happening, a lot of plot threads, a lot of sort of different battlefields, and we're eventually building up to, of course, the big major plot point of Kirito's return at some point, and so on. So, in that sense, I do like the way they're doing it, in that they always make sure to have something of note in every episode, and so it's not just sort of a slice of every single plot point. And some episodes don't really have much of an identity. This episode did have that identity because we got the Code 871 explanation from the title, in addition to sort of Lifa finally gets her big entrance as a goddess to sort of change the tides on a battlefield. And even then, in other parts of the episode, the start of the Sinon Subtilizer fight was also quite notable. Obviously, that's going to continue as we go forward, but what we got was actually a significant section. So let's begin with the Yanai stuff, since that's where we start, and it's also kind of where we end to a degree. So there's still a little bit more of this to come, but we get most of the explanation here. He has been working with Administrator to make this happen. Now, this basically helps to retroactively explain why the Seal of the Right Eye is in the game at all. And Kikuoka directly says it here. No, we would never have approved something like this because it goes directly against what Project Alicization is trying to make happen. We want the AIs to become truly free-thinking AIs like Alice. That's what the goal of the project was in the first place. Obviously, the core goals in the first place were more militaristic at the start, but now everyone has come to realize that no, they have succeeded in creating what they wanted to, and now they realize that it shouldn't be used for military purposes. That's what Gabriel Miller is in to try and steal Alice for, and now sort of the Japanese side of that with Kikuoka have realized that that was a mistake, so they're going to defend Alice. So that's the entire significance of this, and why it is so significant that Alice is the only one. But then later on in the episode revealing that Lil Palin is close but not exactly the same as Alice in what he did, in that they just very sort of simply explain that sort of he broke his seal through sort of emotion, whereas Alice broke her seal through logic. Obviously emotion and logic were involved in both sides, but Lil Palin's one was very much a sort of heat of the emotion, the despair of the situation, and him in kind of one big moment bursting through the seal, whereas Alice's one was more of just purposefully understanding what was happening, making a true decision on her own to go down a different path, and it breaking that way, and not entirely just through the raw emotion of like one individual moment. That's the significance of this. They want a true sort of noticeable difference in intelligence, someone truly kind of sentient in their own way, and that is Alice at this point. So that was nice in that that's how they noticed this code coming up. When they noticed that something happened to one of the floodlights on the field, and that this code was affecting them at some point, that's when they realized the significance of what it was doing. And 871 is what's written on Yanai's lab coat, and it relates to his name, Yanai, the numbers as well in Japanese. That worked really, really well. In addition to it fitting in very nicely with what we know about Administrator. Her big thing in terms of how she gained power was that she unlocked the sort of command codes for everything within the game. So of course she would know how to do commands enough to communicate with someone outside of the game. She knew about the kind of console to act outside, and she contacted Yanai, and sort of in a way like Chedelkin, that same level of, let me be a servant to you and I'll do everything for you. Yana is basically the same way. He just wants to be sort of beside her number one servant. He'll do anything for her. And it links into his past, because he reveals that he was working with Sugo back in the second arc of SAO, the saving Asuna from Alfheim arc, and that he directly is the one responsible for the whole tentacle incident that, of course, was a big controversial thing in that season. But now we find out that directly here is the guy responsible for that. And it links entirely into, oh, of course, this would explain his obsession with Administrator. He's this perverted character as well. And, we find out that he's just sort of out to survive here. He doesn't care what happens to Kirito because Kirito killed Administrator. Or Admi, as is his nickname for her. So I really like that her whole control of the underworld comes from her tricking someone on the outside to code something into the game that would allow her to maintain that control over everyone, while also basically locking everyone out of, for the most part, ever becoming free-willed AIs. Because that's the whole point of the Taboo Index, is that it keeps everyone under Administrator's control, because she can create the rules that will activate the seal of the right eye. And because that seal is strong enough and it causes so much pain, no one's ever going to disobey them enough to go against her. So that's why there's only like 2 characters now in the series who have broken it in the sort of the proper way. Again, Iskon has come close, but he ripped out his own eye instead of it bursting on its own. But the idea that he is close to the same level as Lilplanin is the way you're meant to view it. But that kind of over the course of this battle, you are seeing the potential for all of these characters, if they really went for it, that so many of them could break the seal, I think, at this point. Sheita, after her understanding and now love for Iskon, him also to Sheita as well, probably could complete the process. Bercoli, I think, by the end, similar, that he couldn't quite do it, but in the end, you almost got that sense with the truth about how he felt about, Alice, the relationship with Finatio, and so on. And that's what's so good about this, and that's what links so well into the Asuna side of the episode, of her trying so desperately on the front lines to make sure that everyone defends the Underworldians, that if they die, it is something that has potential dying. Yes, everyone that has come in, like Lisbeth, Silka, and everyone, are risking their accounts, but they're not risking their lives in the same way that the Underworldians are. And so there was so much significance to just the random soldiers on the human side of the war dying, because it was like someone of Alice's potential who could have one day become just like her, getting slaughtered on the battlefield, and all because of this setup from Critter on the outside, and then Pooh lying on the inside to have all the foreign players attack the Japanese players here. And I really like that build-up of despair with Asuna, that she is the sort of focal center point here of the battle, the sort of commander on the good guy side of things here. And she is commanding all of these forces who are her friends, everyone she knows, and that's why it's so significant that you have the Sleeping Knights Guild there, led by Siune, and she is the one to try and reason with the foreign players. Now, I wish they had actually gone a little bit more in depth into explaining this, but that the reason they focused on Siune in this moment is because it's revealed that one of her parents is South Korean and one of her other parents is Japanese, so she can speak Korean and Japanese, which is why she, of all the players, is able to actually talk to them and sort of get through to the other players. And that's why, the Korean player we met in the last episode does take his helmet off to speak to her, and seems to be convinced until Pooh gives his speech again to double the rest of the forces against everyone. And it just seems like it's going wrong. And especially, it's very emotional when you see all the players that Lisbeth gave one of the most impassioned speeches you'll ever see in anime to get people to come, and now they're falling. Seeing just those kind of connections of, Sakuya going over to try and help Alicia Rue, because those two have always sort of been connected ever since we kind of first met. And, Egil lying on the ground with spears in him, like Klein wounded. Everyone is at risk here, and their accounts are at risk. And especially Lisbeth, given that she feels now responsible for potentially losing all these accounts and all those hours that people spent on their second life, basically, because that's what the entire series of SAO has sort of been about, that the virtual world is not just this sort of meaningless game. It is meaningful and has impact. That's what all of the arcs have been about. They're in a game right now, and it's a fight for real life and death. So their accounts also have value to them as well. And so Lisbeth's really beating herself up over this, and I like that Asuna, despite what she's going through, goes over to comfort Lisbeth, showing, Asuna's strength in the situation. But then what really sort of breaks Asuna here, and we'll see, will she just, falter at this point, or will she be able to stand up stronger, given that Pooh is now targeting Kirito. Kirito is brought out. He sees Kirito in the state that he's in and just laughs. And I love the build-up of this. Of like, he's been doing not a lot apart from just, building up the tensions between the Japanese players and everyone else. But the second he comes down, and it's all about SAO for him. He wants to confront Asuna, Lightning Flash Asuna. And they think it's like, oh, you want revenge because we took down your guild. But he's like, no. Like, you think you're responsible for that, but I was the one who leaked our information to you guys. And I did it on purpose because it would turn all of the frontline players into murderers. And I just wanted to see that. I didn't care about the other people in my guild. I just wanted to see people murder each other. I just wanted to murder people. That's what this character is about. And we're going to get backstory on this character. The next episode is called, Prince of Hell, which is obviously his initials. I can't remember. I'd have to read volume 18 again, but I'm pretty sure it probably is around the time when we should be getting his backstory. So I suppose the next episode probably will be that, I guess. And it's very interesting when we learn about who this guy is, who Visago Castles is, who POH is, and what his goal is, and all of this. But here it's this sudden reveal about this event that we heard about back in GGO. This was the core of Kirito's character arc in GGO. Him dealing with the fact that he killed 2 people in SAO. And that was why it was so sort of thematic with him meeting Sinon in that arc of her having killed people in real life, killed someone in real life, him having killed people properly in game, and they're bonding over what does it mean to have strength in the real world versus the virtual world and stuff like that. I really appreciated this episode for, at the same time, bringing that stuff up with Kirito, POH, and Asuna, and then basically referring to the same thing on the Sinon Subtilizer side of the episode. But I just really like the emotion in this situation by the end. When Asuna sees POH confronting Kirito, the emotion from what she's been doing, it's really good, because it shows the strength of the character who, she was the first one to dive in, and she's been fighting pretty much this whole time. And I really appreciate the focus on her to just get this chance to just do all this stuff. And now we're going to get to see, either is Kirito going to somehow come back straight away, or is Asuna going to have to fight POH? That's the big setup here. Because, of course, we ended the episode here with the sort of tease that, Higa hasn't had the chance yet to fully connect Kirito up with the other soul translators of Asuna, Sinon, and Lifa yet. So Kirito can't come back until that happens, and Yana is still holding a gun at him, and Higa's just holding out hope that the others realize and come after him, which they have just figured out. They acknowledge that, oh, we just sent Higa down with this guy, and he's responsible for the sort of the traitor in our midst, basically. So that's the setup for next time out, and that they're going to realize what's going on. But there's a firefight happening in or around that area, and it's only them sending the robot to distract them that's holding them off. So a huge risk is at play here. So many things happening in the story, and it's all really, really good in my mind. Like, how brave is Higa going to be to save Kirito? So that's a big thing as well. I suppose getting to the Sinon Subtilizer thing, again, they didn't focus on it too much, but just we went from the whole idea of he immediately catches her in the choke and immediately moves into acknowledge their previous confrontation and him, oh, I didn't get an opportunity to steal your soul in that moment, but I want to, and I'm going to do it here. And just this immediate demonstration of his power, that he can just, with that sort of darkness tendril, just immediately grab her, have complete control over her. And it looks like he's about to, as he says, steal her soul from her. Because that's his whole thing. Gabriel Miller's whole thing is about stealing souls in relation to his backstory with the girl he was, Alicia, who he was, I suppose, going to potentially marry one day. And just that weird obsession with like, oh, where's the soul in an insect? And then, where's the soul in Alicia? And he kills her to find out what happened, and since then has been just obsessed with the idea of the soul, which is why it's so significant that he is the villain in this arc that is dealing with basically the souls of like AIs and stuff like that the soul is in the brain as we got explained early on in Alicization. But as we've been getting, and I think it's very significantly done through a lot of the Subtilizer, Vecta, and Sinon stuff, which is that the main power of the Underworld is this incarnation power, which is basically the power of your soul altering the world around you, which is how Sinon is able to turn her goddess bow into her sniper rifle. And that all relates back to the power of the soul. And the fact that Sinon has managed to dive in here, and an item that there's no way could technically exist in the game, something that she has in real life, a necklace made with the electrode that saved Kirito's life when he was nearly poisoned back at the end of the GGO arc. That's her memento of that event with Kirito. That sort of activates, and it's this sort of moment of Kirito sort of, even though he's not active at this point, protecting her. And in looking at that electrode, she remembers, that event with Kirito and the strength that she has gained since then from just, being around him with the group in that arc, the GGO arc. How she's different now. Before, earlier Sinon, probably like we saw in the first fight with Subtilizer, would have just, let her weakness get ahead of her and she'd fall into and lose her soul here, but not this Sinon. So she steps back, fights, and the biggest show of her strength is the incarnation ability to transform her goddess weapon into her GGO weapon. And the demonstration of how powerful she is that typically he would be able to block anything with his hands, but she manages to send the bullet through his hand. So they are going to have a GGO fight in the Underworld, and I think that's really good setup because we've known about the idea of Subtilizer being the winner of one of the Bullet of Bullets for so long. So Sinon getting this chance to fight, to give Alice time to get to the World End's altar, is really good. And obviously we didn't get too much of it here. It was just ending with the note of they each have their sort of, I suppose, signature rifle. Who's going to win? So really, really appreciate that setup on that side of things. And then the other, I suppose, smaller part of the episode, but still memorable, was Lifa making her appearance on the battlefield. And as I suspected, it was, of course, going to be her arriving on the battlefield where Iskan and Sheita were holding out with the pugilists. They were being surrounded on all sides. Another nice little moment showing the connection, the romance between Iskan and Sheita. And then Lifa arrives on the scene, takes everyone out pretty much just with her pure sword skills. And then Lilpulin comes in with his army. And Lifa is saying, I don't want anyone else to get killed. I'll hold them off on my own. That's very strong. Because we know Lifa has sword skills in real life. And she's been obviously playing the game since the second arc. So she's going to be incredibly, incredibly skilled. And that makes sense because she also basically has unlimited health, like perfect healing and stuff like that. So, she's going to be like borderline impossible to defeat. But as we saw with the Asuna side of the battlefield, the odds are turning against, the hero characters. So what's going to happen is the major question in all of this. So the other thing as well is that we do get a shot right at the end of the episode showing a server, like the SAO server. And if you've seen Ordinal Scale, it's the same one that they show there. So obviously this is it's one of those weird ones in that like people are suspecting it might be like, oh, is this where they're going to bring in some of the Ordinal Scale stuff and focus on that for a little bit? Some content that wasn't in the light novels that we'll get next time out? Or was it a tease of a kind of notable plot point that is going to be happening in the final volume with a certain major SAO character? But I won't spoil that. So, yeah. It's one of those episodes where I ended it the first time. I was kind of like, yeah, like I said at the start, was this episode just sort of a slice of every arc? But then you realize that, no, this was actually really, really good. Like, it connected a lot of things together, had a bunch of reveals that gave you so much insight into what happened before. Like Code 871 was actually really, really important to explain a lot of stuff from earlier arcs. I loved the Sinon and sort of Kirito, I suppose, through the POH sort of connection. The explanation of, the idea of they both killed people and so on. That was a really nice connection to have, of just the strength of that arc, referencing back to GGO and what we learned there. And just, I think at this stage of the story, the whole franchise is really coming together quite nicely in terms of you're emotional for characters like Sakuya and Alicia Rue going down, Siune getting injured, trying to bring peace between the foreign players. And these are characters from like the second arc, the fourth arc of the series. And they're all here on the battlefield together. That's really well done in my mind. So they're my thoughts on the episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.